down. Now, these purples and whites, that represents areas of drier air at the surface. And these greens and light blues represent much higher relative humidity. Relative humidity goes down to about 90% up here at the surface, whereas it's 100% just off the coast and about 98% in here. So what you're seeing is this definite source of dry air up here in Maine and southeast New Hampshire. That's flowing, remember that 950 millibar map I showed you? That's flowing right down into the interior. And that source of drier air was what was able to offset the latent heat release that was going on during the icing event. It was a fresh supply of colder, drier dew points. So the whole cycle was just kind of sitting there going back and forth. It was never, you didn't just have that ramp up from 29 freezing rain, 30, 31, then eventually you get to 33 and rain and it stops. What happened is that it wasn't able to rise because anytime any sort of heating, latent heat was just getting offset immediately by the lower dew points draining in from northern New England, just like this. Now, I circled these two areas. You're going to see that these two areas on the next map are very warm. And even though they're drier, this is because of downslope. If you know the terrain here, this is right where the Berkshires are. Now this is just west of the spine of the Berkshires and you see drier air. Now even though it dried it out, which you might say, okay, so that means it's going to be freezing rain because it's fresh supply of dry air. That wasn't the case because not only does downslope cause drying, it causes warming of the air. So even though it was drying out, the air was actually warming a little bit. So you saw lots of 30-degree temps in here, 30, 31. But then back in here you saw 35, even 36, 34. A lot of temps above freezing in here. So even though the air was kind of drying out at the surface, it was also heating up. So these areas in here did not receive the icing. That areas right up in here did, even though they're pretty much the same elevation. And even areas in the Housatonic Valley in the Berkshires with up to 1,000 feet elevation didn't see any ice because they were getting downsloped off the spine. And that was a big deal. If you could drive 5 miles, it would be a different world. And that was so that's a very important mesoscale aspect of icing events that you'll see very commonly, and you have to be aware of that. Okay, so we talked about how this area is the same elevation as this area, and they're at the same latitude. So why did this area lose power for what seemed like a month, and this area got nothing? Well, the cold draining air was the biggest source in the downslope. This was 9 p.m. on the night of the ice storm. Now, here's the 32-degree line. Now notice where that cold air source, if you remember the 950 millibar map, and you remember the relative humidity map I just showed, look at this right in here. For those of you in the back who can't see, it's like 28, 29, 30, 30, 29. A lot of temperatures below freezing right here. Now go west into the Connecticut River Valley. Look at this, 34, 33, 33, 36, 35. All these areas are above freezing and not getting any ice at all. And that's because these guys were closer to the cold, dry air source, plus they weren't receiving a downslope component that this area was. Another feature of being west of the higher terrain here was the cold air at the very low levels had trouble bleeding over the hills and the mountains right in here. So not only were you getting a little bit of downslope, you were also having trouble bleeding that really low level because this wasn't going on very high in the atmosphere. This is only the lowest 100 millibars here. It was having a little bit of trouble bleeding over the edge. So that's why out in the Berkshires, you had to go a little bit higher to receive the same icing that areas over here saw. And west of the Berkshires, there was a more effective drainage that was occurring here in the Hudson Valley. You can see the temperatures in the Hudson Valley are much cooler. Like the Hudson Valley, same elevation here is in a lot of spots even lower in the Connecticut River Valley, yet they had a much more effective draining coming in from Lake Champlain Valley probably all the way down. They didn't have much to block it, so they were a little bit more efficient and cool. Yes?
How come in every icing event I'm always 32.000?